You're tuned into the Zelos podcast. I'm your host, Rocky Snyder, and this week, Cole Hergott joins me from Trinity Western University up in British Columbia in the Vancouver area of Canada. And we're going to talk all about him and the director of strength conditioning and all the sports he does. But before that, the NSCA is having their national conference this July 16th to the 19th, Kansas City, Missouri. Hope you can join me there. Just go to nsca.com to register. Also, check out my website while you're online. Continuing education workshops, in-person and online available. I've got a whole bunch of blogs and podcasts, rockysnyder.com. And then maybe join me in Chicago or Providence, Rhode Island this summer for the 3-day functional summit that PerformBetter.com puts on. Go to PerformBetter.com for more information. Also check out Setanta College. They've got Masters of Science in Applied Sports Biomechanics and Movement Science. They've got an Applied Sport and Exercise Psychology, Performance Coaching, and the one I'm about to finish, Sports Injuries and Return to Performance Management. Go to SetantaCollege.com, enter RS10 for 10% off tuition today. Hey, check out my book, Return to Center, Strength Training to Align the Body, Recover from Pain, and Achieve Optimal Performance. Follow us on Instagram at Rocky_Snyder. Click that darn subscribe button. You've been listening long enough. Now's your time to hit it and enjoy the show. Cole, welcome on to the Zelos podcast, man. I've been up to your neck of the woods in British Columbia, and got to say, you live in a beautiful part of the world, man. Welcome on.
Well, thank you. I'm honored to be on, and yeah, even though I didn't create BC, thank you for complimenting where I live, because yeah, it is pretty nice.
Did you grow up in that region, or did you move there?
I moved here, so I'm actually originally from Saskatchewan, so right in the middle of the country where everything is flat and their sports are far and few between. But yeah, I came out here because there's a little more opportunity, and I never left because I looked at the mountains and I was like, yeah, I'm gonna just stay right here.
Right on. Well, myself growing up in New England, so we had pond hockey probably about 4 months out of the year, and some winters it was a little bit more, middle, little bit less. But in Saskatchewan, man, that's like pond hockey 9 months out of the year, isn't it?
Oh, at least 9 months. Yeah, yeah. It's
Damn.
gets pretty cold there for a long time. Summers are beautiful though. Like when you come there on a nice sunny day, it doesn't rain very often, so it's going to be consistently sunny. Whereas I would say BC is more beautiful when the weather's nice, but when the weather's not nice, yeah, it's not as much fun.
So I imagine you grew up playing hockey amongst other sports.
I did. I played pretty much everything I could. So small town Saskatchewan, everybody had to play everything. Otherwise, we couldn't form a team. And so we kind of played baseball, volleyball. We had a badminton team. We played hockey. Kind of everything we could. But yeah, hockey was my, the classic Canadian. I'm going to go to the NHL kind of thing. So I fell into that bucket, and here I am, not in the NHL.
Oh, how far did you go? I'm curious.
Just up to junior B, and then I did end up coming actually out here to Trinity to play in my first year. So at the time we played in what was called the British Columbia Intercollegiate Hockey League. So I can say I played college hockey for a year, but I wasn't very good.
And were you defenseman, or
I
what was
was,
your?
yeah,
Yeah.
big, tall defenseman, long stick, poke check, that kind of deal. Pass the puck up off the glass and out and stay out of trouble, that kind of thing.
Thanks. So what inspired you into strength conditioning?
Sports, pretty much. Like I was a chunky kid growing up, and I didn't like that, and I was bullied a little bit because of it, and I wanted to find a way to not have that happen to me. And luckily, uh, training physically helped me on the aesthetic side, but also on the performance side. And so I kind of dove into that, read a bunch of stuff online, followed programs online, like the early bodybuilding.com stuff, and just fell in love with the physical changes I saw in the mirror, as well as the changes on the ice, and just the hope it kind of gave me of, I'm going to be better, I'm going to be faster, I'm going to, get this many points, I'm going to make this team. And I just fell in love with the off season pretty much, which kind of led me into deciding that this was something I wanted to do when I went to university, as far as like studying kinesiology. And then when I came out here to Trinity in my undergrad to play on the men's hockey team, I met my first strength coach, who was Andrew Hemming. And it was at that time I realized, wow, like this is actually a profession that you can do. And pretty much ever since that moment, it was like, yeah, that's what I want to be. And then here I am. So pretty cool.
That is really cool. Okay, I don't think I've ever asked this question to all the guests that I've had here, but do you remember the first day walking into your gym, into the gym? Like you're saying, "Oh, I got to do this," and so what was that like? Give me an idea of the first gym. What was it called? Where did you go? What was it like?
Yeah, like here at the university or like just like way back when?
No, way back when,
Oh,
where
way
you
back
were
when.
that 99-pound weakling getting sand kicked in your face.
So, I actually, the first program I ever followed was Gary Roberts and Matt Nickel, who are two hockey strength coaches up here. Gary Roberts actually played in the NHL. Matt Nickel was a strength coach in the NHL and what for a long time. Anyway, but they partnered with Nike and they produced a program called The Program. And it's funny, I actually have it here in my office because I've kept it ever since then. But it was like super basic stuff. But it's what I basically found when I Google searched, training program for hockey players, and that came up, and I followed that for a couple summers, and that was kind of my first experience. I think we had some weights at home, so my first experience wasn't even really in a weight room. It was just doing things at home. And then my small town in Saskatchewan did get a fitness center not until I was in high school, and then I remember going there with one of my buddies like every day we would go and just train whatever. And he wasn't an athlete, so he was going there and hitting chest and all this stuff all the time. And as a hockey player, I had to do legs, so I would do my squats and my deadlifts, and then I would do arms and abs and all that stuff. But luckily, early on, I knew a little bit of what was good for me. And I still remember like that fitness center still there. Whenever I go home and visit my parents, I'll get a membership for a week and kind of go back in there, and not much has changed. So the same old weights and same old smell kind of thing. But yeah, my first experience was with Gary Roberts and Matt Nickel online, and that just kind of got me hooked.
That's awesome. I love that. Okay, so now here we are in the present time, and you're director of strength conditioning at Trinity. What does that involve?
It involves a lot of coaching, a lot of basically talking about sports all day and just bantering back and forth with 18 to 22-year-olds who think they're smarter than I am, and so I gotta show them that they're not. But basically, my day is I'll coach. So we'll run sessions pretty much all day. So our first session usually starts at 8, and then it goes till about 5 or 6. And so I'm coaching all my sessions throughout the week. Obviously, doing admin stuff. We're doing testing with athletes. I run what I think is a pretty decent internship for our Canadian universities. So I have a group of about 10 interns that help me out throughout the year. And so obviously educating them, we'll do like professional development meetings. Um, yeah, it's kind of the typical strength coach stuff, just coaching, loving life, having fun, and hopefully getting athletes better along the way.
Wow. Okay. Please do not take offense to this, but you appear quite young to to be taking on that role with 10 interns. Either you found the fountain of youth and you're not sharing that insight with me, or man, people see inside of you and they go, "This is the guy that needs to be doing exactly what he's doing." So, how did you get that position, first of all?
Yeah, it was. Well, thank you for complimenting me on my pretty much lack of facial hair. That's what makes me look so young. But basically, what happened was, so I did my undergrad here at Trinity, and throughout that time, I started interning in the weight room, especially after my first season where I um, got quote unquote cut from the men's hockey team, or basically just told, hey, like we probably don't have a spot for you next year, but you could be a student intern and you could like kind of help our team that way. And so I was upset, but decided to kind of go through that door that I believe God opened up for me, and kind of walked through it. And then 3 years later, as I was graduating from my undergrad, the strength coaches at the time obviously saw the passion that I had and what I wanted to do, and said, hey, like if you really want to make this a profession, like you should go get your master's degree, get fully certified, qualified, all those things. And so I had my CSCS. I went to the University of British Columbia, so actually in Vancouver, so about an hour away, to do my master's degree. And halfway through, so I was a 2-year program. Halfway through that program, this job opened up, and so I wasn't expecting it. I wasn't really ready, but I knew this is where I wanted to be, and so I was like, I gotta throw my name in the hat and they picked me. And a lot of that, I mean, I was 25 at the time, which was quite young, and I think would have made me probably the youngest head strength coach in Canada at the time for a university. But a lot of it came down to I knew this place. I crushed my interview and my application because I had been here for 4 years, and I knew what the strength program was like, and I knew the changes that I kind of wanted to make to help it grow. And so again, they picked me, and basically as soon as I started, it was just kind of going to work with the things I wanted to change, because I didn't have to spend time getting to know the coaches and getting to know the athletes, because most of the athletes were my classmates, a year ago. So the biggest struggle I had was actually in trying to separate myself as a professional, and like, hey, you can't call me bro and buddy and make fun of me, which athletes do now, and I let them get away with, but whatever. But early on, it was like, okay, I need to separate myself as a professional, and so I spend most of my time kind of doing that, and as I kind of jokingly said early on, like proving that I know more than the athletes, because I get it. Like, once again, a year ago, we were sitting in the same kinesiology class studying together, and we probably got similar marks. And now I'm telling you, you know, what to do, and you need to listen to me. So a lot of that was just developing relationships, and yeah, and I was, yeah, very young at the time. I think we had 4 or 5 athletes that were older than I was, and that obviously, gave me some challenges as far as I mentioned, trying to establish myself. But the benefit was, people knew me. They knew the work I'd done as an intern. They knew, my heart for the school and for strength and conditioning, and the coaches knew that, who I was at least. And so again, as much as there were challenges, it wasn't like I was starting from scratch as a 25-year-old that nobody trusted. I at least had that, my foot in the door to begin with, and then here we are 7 years later.
Fantastic, Cole. I love your humility. I love the story. I really I am endeared by your passion and how you take everything that these are experiences, but they're also learning lessons and something that you can really develop your craft that much more. You mentioned that there were some things that you wanted to change within the program. Give me an idea of what we're talking.
So the biggest thing was our schedule. So before I started, it was just like an open gym concept. So strength coaches would say, hey, weight rooms, open at 7 a.m. and it closes at 6 p.m., Monday to the Friday kind of thing. And you got to come get your lifts in, which made for some obviously logistical challenges from making sure that everybody got in. So it basically came down to what the sport coaches demanded. So some of our coaches, said, hey, our team is going to come in twice a week. It doesn't matter when they come in, obviously, but they're going to come in twice a week. So we saw those athletes, twice a week. Some coaches said, hey, I want my athletes to work out. And lo and behold, those athletes, never showed up, maybe showed up once. And so it was essentially a gong show. And I remember there'd be times I would intern for like 3 hours straight, and there'd be maybe 1 or 2 athletes in. And then, of course, once it was like the lunchtime break, everybody wants to work out. And so we actually had to turn athletes away because they would walk in and it would just be just slam full. And so then they'd be like, okay, I'll just come back later. And of course they wouldn't. And so they didn't get their workout in. And so the first thing I did when I came in, I said, like we need to have a schedule. We need to have some kind of organization. Number one, because, I don't want to be here for 13 hours hoping that people show up. I was recently married, and so I, wanted to spend time with my wife as well, and I couldn't just promise athletes I'd be there all the time. But a lot of coaches didn't want to jump on the bandwagon of team sessions. They didn't like, restricting their athletes to, oh, they got to come at this time, and they didn't really see the benefit. So what we did that first year was I created a schedule based on everybody's availability. So, on Monday at 8 a.m., there'd be a group of, 15 to 20 athletes that, could make that time. And then at 9, there was another group, and at 10. And so I made that schedule based on, everyone sent me their class schedule, and I picked times for them. And it was like the hardest thing I've ever done in my job. Like I would not recommend anyone doing that. And my wife helped me out a ton because she's a wizard with like Google Sheets and stuff. So anyway, she helped me out a lot. But it created a basically soundproof schedule so that I could ensure that everyone came in at least twice, or if a coach wanted their athletes come in 3 times, I knew when they were coming in. And I started taking attendance and sending that to coaches to hold people accountable. and all those good things. And it was going really well. So this is 2019. And then of
Uh,
course the new year turns and COVID hits. And, we shut down for a couple months, but then when we come back, we have to train in our bubbles. And so I told our coaches, like, we have to do team sessions like that. Like my hands are tied. So we started doing team sessions, and it's been the best thing that's probably ever happened to our athletic department because all the coaches now are like, oh, we should have been doing this years ago. Like they love
right?
it. The teammates, like athletes love it, teammates love it. It's obvious, as you know, like it's so much easier to coach. Like there's so many positives to it that I'm shocked that we weren't doing this before. But now
Yeah,
now we're rolling.
I I didn't want to interrupt you earlier when you mentioned that the coaches weren't really keen on having their team train at the same time. It just was it floored me. Like you want to develop a culture, you want to develop camaraderie, the team to rely on each other, and yet you're okay with just having them haphazardly come in when they want. I mean, there's a complete disconnect there, which I'm glad one of the benefits of a global pandemic is the fact that things changed for you guys and you're forced into it and they saw the error of their ways, shall we say. Well, that's great. Okay, so let's talk teams. It's not just hockey, obviously. What teams do you oversee? What are the teams at Trinity?
Yeah, so we have men's and women's basketball, men's and women's volleyball, men's and women's hockey, men's and women's soccer, men's and women's rugby, and then cross country, track and field, and disc golf. So there's like 13 teams, about 300 or just under 300 athletes, depending on the time of year. And I get to coach them all.
And that's Monday through Friday, or do you have the gym open on Saturdays also?
Just Monday through Friday. We haven't really done any Saturday stuff. Like if athletes aren't playing on the weekend, I'll give them a session they can just kind of go do on their own. But we just go Monday, Friday.
And do you cycle them in such a way where, okay, at this time of year for these preseason sports, they're coming in 3 days a week, but while they're in season or at the end of the season going into postseason, they're 2 days a week? Like, how do you manage all that? Or does it stay consistent all year round?
The schedule stays consistent all year round, but my expectations will change a little bit. So, for
Hmm.
example, our volleyball team pretty much plays all year round, so they lift 3 times a week all year round. Our women's soccer team or soccer teams, their season goes from like August to November. So the whole spring semester, they have like spring league games, but they don't have any like Canada West game, any conference games. And so they'll lift twice a week in season. But once we hit off season, they still have only their 2 team lifts. But my expectation is that they get a third lift done. If they come and see me, because I do have some open, like some flex times on Friday, and a lot of athletes will make use of that. So I see a lot of our out of season teams in those times. But to me, I'm like if you have a gym close to your house, I'm not going to make you drive in an hour on a Friday where you maybe don't have classes. But I just expect them to get the work done, and most of them are pretty good about it. And so that's the way we run that. But we like with these 200 athletes, like we're working out of an 1,100 square foot old classroom for our weight room. So it's not very big. So I don't have the luxury of just saying, yeah, come in whenever you want. Let's get an extra session. There's actually a lot of logistical implications of that. And so I have kept the schedule the same this will be the third year where I haven't really touched anything in the schedule. And that way, when athletes pick their classes, they know when their lift times are, they know to keep things consistent. And yeah, it is unfortunate that, for example, our men's soccer team lifts right after they practice in the morning, first thing in the morning in season, and that's perfect. But then they're out of season, that sucks because now they got to get up early when they wouldn't normally have training. And for me, I'm like, I'm sorry guys, like you get the luxury half the year and half the year it's going to suck, but I can't swap you out because there's nowhere to swap you to. So that's kind of the way we
Wow.
roll.
I think I counted about 12 or 13 sports
Yeah,
between men's and women's. Is that about right?
yeah, 13 I think. Yeah.
Okay. And with each of those, you've got coaching staff and you've got yourself and the training staff, and you've got the medical staff as well. How frequently are you having touch points with all those coaches or maybe the assistant coaches?
uh, at least weekly. So our sport coaches, I'll send a text to our coaches every week just to give them a heads up of like, hey, this is what's coming down the pipe. These are just so you know, we're going to start doing RDLs, their hammies might be sore, or we're going to do testing in a couple weeks, just so you know, I may need some more time, or like those kind of things, which has been a huge benefit. I just started doing that the last couple of years, because primarily I would just send emails, and I would send email updates to kind of the whole team and hope that the coaches would read them. And a lot of times they wouldn't, and they'd get upset about what I was doing. And I'm like, well, I told you, but they obviously didn't read that. So now I text them and like, hey, this is what's happening. And it's been awesome. One of the best things I've actually done, as far as communication goes. I meet with my like supervisors, like our admin, once a month, just to touch base on what's happening. I'll meet with our therapy team at least once a week. I'll make a point of going over and seeing them in the clinic and touching base on, maybe some bigger or longer term injury people, or just some things that just pop up. But as far as like face-to-face meetings, I'll meet with our coaches twice every semester. So once at the beginning, once at the end. And obviously if something comes up, we'll meet again, but I at least make sure I am contacting them once a week, so that we can just make sure we're on the same page.
Okay, and now you've got about 10 interns, as you say, and you've got 12 or 13 sport teams. So I'm imagining that you delegate 1 to 2 sports per intern. They'll be in the weight room helping to keep track of lifts and athletes and so on. Is that accurate?
That is not accurate at all, actually.
Whoa,
So
cool.
yeah, so that's what I thought too. So we have like 13 teams, and over the past couple of years, I've had about 12 or 13 interns, and that was my thought. I was like, sweet, one intern
Yeah.
per team. They'll come in during those lift times. It's going to be awesome. The first issue is we're a small private Christian school, and so we don't have that many. Like when we have, a class offered, it's only offered one time, and so that means that all of my third year interns have class at like the exact same time, and so
Uh,
they all come at the same time, or they can't come when I need them. And so what I've had to do is just get them to pick. So I make my interns come in. Their expectation is they come in for 3 sessions a week, so just 3 hours a week, but they get to pick and choose when those times are. And so some interns are able to pick, hey, I'm going to choose all of women's volleyball sessions, which is awesome because you can see the relationships built by the end of the semester, and just their comfortability of them coaching. And then some of my interns obviously have to pick random times because some of them also have jobs outside of this, and whatever. So that becomes a logistical issue. The other main issue is about 60 to 70% of my interns are Spartan athletes that are getting their kin degree. And so it becomes tough for me to have a men's volleyball player just be an intern for like the men's rugby team, or like that way, because well, their training times are the same as their training times, and it just becomes this gong show. So what ends up happening is I've got like 3 interns during a lift where there's not many athletes because there's no classes, and then when there's classes and people are busy and whatever, I don't have any interns when I need them. So I'm trying to workshop it to get maybe more interns, or just have like for me an ideal scenario would actually to have like non-athletes be interns, more of them, because I like growing the reach of Spartan athletics. I like bringing more people in, and so if it's just the athletes, it's like, well, they're already in here, with me 2 to 3 hours a week, and so they make great interns because they know what to expect, they know what I'm expecting, they know what the lifts are. It's easy, but I like having non-Spartans as well, because then I can ask them to go do other things as opposed to knowing, well, they got practice or they just came from practice, and all these other things. So you made a great assumption, and that it is the way I wish it was, but that's not the way we do it here.
No, but I completely understand with all those other elements you have to contend with, that of course it's not going to be as easy as that. So do you have, well, like you say, you meet with the coach at the beginning of the year and at the end of the year. Is that kind of how it works with the interns too? Because otherwise you're just kind of they're all spread out and you're putting your hands on whenever you can or making connections with them. But how does it work? You just get them all together at the beginning of the year and then have some type of celebration at the end?
Actually, we do a little bit more frequently. So we do monthly Pro D meetings. So we'll do one like right away, almost like a training camp, right when they show up on campus, just to kind of outline, hey, this is what's happening. This is, how you coach and spot and cue, and just kind of some basic things. So they're at least a little bit useful. And then once a month, we'll tackle a different topic. So I've got a curriculum I kind of go through. So the first one, like we'll do some more stuff on coaching. We'll go through warm-ups. So then they can lead their own warm up. Then we'll go through testing so that they can help with testing a little bit better. And then once we get to December, so our Christmas break, I take them on a field trip and we'll go to, I like to take them to another university because there's a few in the area. Just that way because we obviously have a small space and we run things a certain way, but I want them to experience what other universities do and get to chat with those coaches and make connections that way. And then we come back in the new year and we talk about programming for 2 months or two like sessions in a row. And then their task is then they have to write a program for me. And then I get to, critique it and shred it up and get some ideas from them as well, which is pretty cool. Then we go over some like career stuff because again, a lot of my interns are going to be in their third or fourth year graduating. They don't know what they're doing. And so I'll talk to them about, resume and interview stuff and how to apply and kind of just offer any help that way. We'll talk about like speed and conditioning specifically because I know especially here, like a lot of our undergrad kin courses focus on the strength side and the power side, but not enough about like how do you get athletes faster or how do you get them fitter for their sport. And so we spend some time on that. And then again in the spring during exams, we'll go on another field trip. And for there, I like to take them to a non-university setting. So whether that's a private or we've gone to like a physio clinic before, just trying to again expand their mind beyond our weight room here, but also just beyond the university. Because again, the university versus the private side is very different. And so I want them not to just think, oh, wow, I was a good intern in Sparta with Cole. I'm just going to be amazing when I work one-on-one, with Gen Pop people. And it's like, that might be the case, but it's a very different thing. And I just like to expand their horizons that way. And then at the end of the school year, I'll meet with my next year's intern crew. So I do my intake for my interns around our spring break, which is like in the end of February. And then so in April, right before our semester ends, I'll meet with, for example, I've met with my 2025, 2026 crew. Hey, these are some things that I'm going to send you over the summertime. Here's a heads up for next year. And then now it's kind of just crickets. I'll send them some articles and stuff, but it's pretty much crickets until September.
How many applicants do you get compared to how many spots you have?
Usually I only have to cut a couple people. So in the past, like my first few years, it was like I got 6 applicants. Okay, I need all 6 of you. Whereas now it's grown to where I'll get, maybe 12 to 15 applicants. And so I'll take again 10 to 12 people. If there's been years where I've taken all 12 because they're all good. I'm not going to turn anybody away if they're good. But over the past couple of years, there's been a couple people where I've had to not take them, which as someone who is more of a pacifist, or I don't like conflict. I don't like, getting in people's face. Having to not take someone makes me really respect what our sport coaches have to do on a weekly basis of saying, hey, Rocky, you're not playing this weekend. And then have to do that, maybe 5 or 6 athletes and do that every single week. Like, man, that's tough. Like I could not do that. So I'm thankful I get to stay in the weight room and be like, yeah, you're doing a great job. I hope you play this weekend.
Wow. Wow. And now at the university, you're teaching. That's obvious. You're teaching so many athletes, you're teaching so many teams and the interns themselves. But from an official standpoint, are there any courses that you teach that are part of their curriculum?
No, I have not dove into the academic side. That is something I've thought about, and because I do like to talk, I do like to do presentations, and the thought of doing that on a weekly basis would be like, yeah, this would be sweet. But I would rather coach, and so as I mentioned earlier, my schedule is quite full of coaching, and so if I had a gap and I was able to teach, I probably would. But to me, I'd rather be in the weight room, not have to grade papers or do midterms or those kind of things, and just still get to teach, but obviously in a different way. So I haven't dove into that yet.
Yeah, there's plenty of time for that for sure, Cole. Okay, next question is this. Before we hit the record button here, you had mentioned your affinity to hockey and how you played hockey at Trinity and before. And when it came time for uh, strength conditioning for all the teams that you oversee, hockey was one of the most challenging ones, which surprises me. What was it, or what still is it, that you find most challenging about hockey S&C?
Uh, well, back then, the thing I found most challenging was just coaching my teammates. Um, again, like I knew most of the guys quite well. And so again, as I mentioned, like easy from a relationship side, but
Yeah.
pretty difficult, telling guys, hey, you're gonna, this session's gonna suck, like you're gonna run till you almost puke kind of thing. And they don't want to hear that from their buddy essentially. So that was a little bit of a challenge. But now I don't know what it is. I maybe it's because some of the guys don't know I played hockey and I need to, flaunt that a little bit more to gain respect. But and like they're a great group of guys and they don't like disrespect me or anything like that. But from our other freshmen, let's say, that come in, they come in when they're 17, 18. Most of them, haven't really lifted a weight or had a strength coach before. Whereas our hockey team, especially our men, have been training, like they're training to make the NHL since they were like 12 years old. So they have a guy back home that they've been training with. And I don't mean any disrespect to those trainers, but on the private side, you have to do certain things to keep your clients. You might do some more gimmicky things or some more sports
Mm.
specific things that here I don't necessarily do. I'm a pretty general guy. Hey, if you get, bigger, faster, stronger, you're going to become a better athlete, and that's what we want. And obviously, again, we have logistical constraints on what we can actually do when there's 20 dudes in the weight room. So the hockey guys come in with a little bit more bias towards what they like. They have a little more preconceived notions of what a strength coach is. And so if I don't fit that bill, then it's a little bit of a harder sell for them. And so that is kind of my biggest challenge with them. It's not like I have really good relationships with them. They do what I ask, but I just find that it's not the same as with other teams. And a lot of that is because they have, again, these preconceived notions of, well, how come we're not doing, this exercise, or how come we don't do that? And it's like, well, number one, I don't necessarily think that's the best option for you. But I also, again, we can't. We have 5 squat racks and there's 22 of you. We have to make sure that things are kind of flowing one way. And I used to get really upset about kind of our men's hockey team and some of their lack of engagement and effort. And I had one of my colleagues make a really good point that hockey is a little bit different because if you look at our volleyball or even our basketball, like this is the next step in their journey. They are still climbing the ladder. Whereas if a men's hockey player is here, that means they didn't make it. They didn't make the NHL. And so,
Mm.
they get up at 7 a.m. and they go to practice, or so they go to class, they go to practice, they come to lift, and then they go home and they watch their friend play in the NHL making $5 million. And they sit there and go, well, this sucks. And so it kind of just shifted my mindset into, giving them a little more leeway, trying to really hammer home those relationships. Because like I've been there. I was a hockey player. I wanted to play in the NHL. There's guys I played with and played against that are there. And I wouldn't trade what I do now for that, but they would 100% would not want to be in school and get to make that money. So I think it's just a different mentality with hockey, men in particular, and just trying to encourage them to make the most of this time to still pursue pro opportunities, which a lot of our guys end up doing when they graduate. But it's just different. It's different than the other sports, and so that I find to be challenging, which again is unfortunate because it's like these are my guys. Like this should be a piece of cake for me, but it's not.
Wow, that's really well said and very insightful in terms of the lower division players and dreams un, unaccomplished in a way. So, okay, how about this? You mentioned other sports. Which ones gave you the most uh, food for thought? Which ones made you go, okay, well, hold on now. I've been a multi-sport athlete. I've played these, and these, so I kind of get a sense of that. And rugby is just taking off your skates and putting the stick off to the side of the pitch. Uh, but I'm thinking like disc golf uh, and track and field. Like, which ones made you go, okay, let's roll up my sleeves and figure out what we're going to do here?
Well, early on it was rugby. I did work with rugby when I was at the University of British Columbia as a GA, and that was like my first introduction to rugby ever. And so when I came to Trinity, thankfully I had that year under my belt, and I'm still learning. Like rugby is not. I can't speak rugby like I can speak hockey, and so I have to work a little bit more at rugby. But thankfully, I've had 5, 6 years under my belt with that, and I've clashed with our rugby coach a little bit, especially early on. And thankfully now we're in a good spot and he trusts me and I trust him and we're kind of rolling there. But Disc golf 100% is yeah, the story with disc golf is I'm standing in the weight room coaching a session, and our athletic director walks in and he says, "Hey Cole, what do you think about coaching a new breed of athlete in Sparta?" And my first thought was like, "Oh wow, two of our alumni had a baby, and it's like the next generation, and he's going to make this announcement." And he goes, "We're going to get a disc golf team." I was like, "Oh, sweet." I didn't even, the only thing I'd ever heard about disc golf was some of our volleyball players like to play it in the off season because it's good, it's easy on the joints. And so immediately I was like, okay, well, I better research this. Well, guess what? There's no research on disc golf athletes. So I'm talking to baseball coaches. I'm talking to people that work with Ultimate Frisbee, and just trying to understand the game, trying to understand the movements, like how to, biomechanically, what does this even look like? I have since gone out and played disc golf a little bit so that I again can understand. And our team has been amazing that way. So a lot of our disc golf athletes they're playing disc golf because they didn't play other sports, or they weren't successful at other sports. No offense to them, and they know this, and I love them, but they're not the most athletic kids. And
Yeah.
so they they have been really good. But they're like the nicest kids ever. So they don't have weight training experience. So when they come in, because everyone always asks me, well, what do you do with disc golf? We do goblet squats, we do push-ups, we do chin-ups, we do all the basic stuff to begin with, and then obviously we branch out a little bit. But they're really really good at teaching me. Like every time they came in the weight room, especially for the first few months, I was just peppering them with questions, trying to understand things. And then eventually they're like, well, just come play around with us. And so I've gone out a few times and played with them, which if strength coaches haven't done that, maybe not with disc golf, but with other
Uh,
sports, I would 100% recommend it, because when athletes are in the weight room and they've walked in and they've never touched a weight before, that's pretty intimidating. And you are there to teach them. So now to flip it around, that was me now. I've never thrown a disc, aside from like playing frisbee, I've never thrown a disc golf disc, and I don't know what I'm doing. And now those athletes are there to teach me. And so it really kind of put flip things around and allowed me to see the way they see the weight room a little bit, which was pretty humbling. And because most of the other sports I've played before growing up, whereas like disc golf, I said I hadn't. And so that was a really good teaching moment for me. But even now, like I'm still researching things on disc golf. I'm trying to understand, because there still isn't a ton out there. There's not a ton of people working with disc golf, so I can't just like call up my buddy who's also doing it. It's like it's just me from the university side and maybe a couple people doing it from the private side. But to answer your original question, disc golf is the one that, yeah, it makes me kind of scratch my head and try to understand a little more. Thankfully, it's not the most complex tactical sport like rugby or soccer, where it's like if you
sure.
can literally understand the throw, you understand disc golf. So
Sweet.
thankfully, that's been that. Yeah.
Yeah, just coincidentally, here in Santa Cruz, California, we have one of the top-rated disc golf courses up at De La Viega Golf Course. In fact, they've had the World Championships here, I think more on one occasion. We've actually
Nice.
got some really nice courses around here. I have walked the courses and played a few times. It's not my go-to sport, but there are some athletes around here that are quite accomplished. It's definitely a different pace and a different type of athlete for sure. And happy to share some little insight after we get off the show here. But all right, and then I'm really surprised also, kind of going back to something you had mentioned, and it was actually about your volleyball teams. They play year round. Like, and so you train year round. I'm imagining there's some type of off season, there's some type of downtime, but it's probably very limited. How do you handle that? How do you program a full year round athlete?
So that all depends on the sport. So, for example, our volleyball teams do get, well, they might get a long off season. So our season ends in about the end of March is when nationals are. So they should get April, May, June, July, and then kind of half of August off. So they should get almost like a 4 month off season, which is perfect. But a
Not a
lot of our,
chance.
but a lot of our volleyball players are quite good, and they will play for the national team in the summertime. And
Yeah.
so that starts now, so like end of May, and that goes until August. So a lot of our athletes do end up playing pretty much all year round. And the same goes for our soccer programs. As I mentioned, our soccer season goes from August to November. So nationals are in November. they get December off, but then they play, like our men will play in like a men's league, our ladies will play like some exhibition games in the spring. So then they play their spring season from January to May. And then of course the summertime is perfect time to play soccer because it's beautiful out. So there's so many soccer leagues that they also play that season. So our soccer teams will almost play 3 seasons. They'll play a fall season, a spring season, and a summer season. And that obviously does pose some challenges. So when our sports, like let's say hockey, gets a full off season, it's awesome. In season is more about just microdosing the adaptation we want. So we still lift heavy, we still lift fast, but the volume is cut down. We're just focusing on the big movements. We'll hinge, we'll squat, we'll push, we'll pull, we'll do some abs, some arms. Hey, get out of here. Save your energy for practice. Then when we hit the off season, then we're hitting a lot more volume. We're focusing on tempo a little more. I'm not worried about making them sore. So I can kind of have a little more free reign. And then when you go to one of our sports like soccer, that is pretty much in season all year round, it becomes very challenging to try to get the adaptations that we need. So when we finish a fall season and I'm going, wow, we weren't fast or strong enough, let's work on that. Well, I get about 6 weeks with them from the end of nationals to the start of their spring season. And of course, I give them a week or two break in there as well. And then that's right in the middle of Christmas and winter holidays. And so they maybe get like 2 or 3 good weeks of training, and then they're into their spring training season, which for a lot of the girls that don't play much in the fall because they're maybe a bench player or they don't make the starting roster, they'll play more in the spring. And so then it almost like flips, and now they're playing a bunch, and so now I got to back off on them. And then in the summertime, everybody's playing, and so it just becomes this weird like, hey, we get a week here, let's hit them a little bit harder here. Hey, we get a week there, let's go. And so I just try to minimize the amount of interference I'm having with our practices and our games. And what that looks like is I keep kind of the same kind of template. Like we'll sprint, we'll jump, we'll do throws, we'll squat, we'll do, push-ups, bench. Like we do all the main exercises, but where let's say our rugby team might be doing like a 4x5 on their squat, with a 5-second eccentric or just something crazy like that because they like to do crazy stuff. Our soccer team's maybe doing 2x3, or they're doing a set of 5 as a warm-up, and then they're doing a heavy set of 2 or a heavy set of 3 on their squat, and then that's it. Now we move on to something else, because that allows athletes to still hopefully at least maintain the qualities that we're trying to get. And obviously, the research shows you only need one good set or one set to failure to make gains and whatnot. And the issue is a lot of our athletes aren't training to failure because they're scared of being sore or they don't know what failure is. And so it just becomes this balance between educating athletes on why I'm asking them to do this, but also having to ask them to do it quite regularly, so that they're maintaining those qualities. And some athletes get it more than others, and some coaches get it more than others. And so it definitely is a challenge when, again, there's 300 kids, there's 13 coaches, and so it's I basically have to wear 13 different masks and have 13 different cultures and all those things, and try to balance that.
Wow. And so with your university, and I'm going to make some potentially false assumptions once more here, is that we'll take like NCAA Division I universities. They have a tremendous amount of resources at their disposal when it comes to monitoring load and volume and fatigue within their athletes. And you've kind of given me a little bit of insight as to just getting a feel for where they are and so on. But do you have resources at your own disposal aside from the very valuable experiential knowledge that you have? Do you have tools that help you, whether it's just simple spreadsheets or monitoring their lifts on a regular basis and creating some type of graph? Do you have wearable tech? Like, how do you, with the resources that you have, what are the best ways that you monitor athletes' fatigue and their volume and load?
Well, the best thing I use is I go up to athletes and say, "Hey, how you feeling today?" Because that's free. But the other things we'll use is we do have Hawk and Dynamics force plates, so we're pretty fortunate to have those. And so I get our athletes to jump on there every month, or sorry, every week, and I'll kind of look at the jumps and kind of assess, what our trends are looking like. that way. So that's kind of one way. Our women's soccer team does have GPS monitors, so they'll wear those. And so again, every week I'll
Okay.
kind of pour over that data and look at that. But no other team has any kind of wearable tech at practice. We've, with myself and our therapy team and the therapy interns, we've tried to look at like session RPE, but that kind of has fallen flat every time we've tried it. So
Why?
the accountability hasn't been super high in the past, and we've had kind of a changeover of our therapy staff, and so we kind of got the project going, and then the head therapist kind of left, and so it kind of sat there. But a lot of it, I think, just came down to athletes not, or us not doing a good enough job of educating athletes on what the RP, like what a 7 out of 10 is, or 8 out of 10, and those kind of things. So that we currently don't do that, or we might do that with one team, but I'm not super involved with that. But our main things are, again, just asking athletes how they're doing, getting them to do a jump, so to see if their subjective matches the objective, and then we do have GPS with our women's soccer team. We also have velocity-based training units, and so I'll use that,
Oh,
especially in the spring season or once we hit the new year as we prep for playoffs. As I use it as a way to taper and to peak our athletes, but it's also a really good tool for them to assess. Again, like if we're benching at zero point 0.5 to zero point 0.6 meters per second, and normally you can hit 225, and now you can't even do 185 at that. Maybe let's have a conversation. Maybe let's look into your sleep and those kind of things. So um, it's not. I mean, obviously, force plates are a big budget item, but for me, I don't use them as much as I should. For me, my biggest value is looking someone in the eye and asking how they're feeling, or just watching them warm up, watching them move, because you can tell a lot from somebody's body language and from the way they respond to you is kind of my biggest thing. And so that's the biggest tool, I would say.
I love that you don't rely too much on technology and you rely on, I won't say instinct, but just gathering up as much information from so many different senses, not just what's on the screen. Cool. I'm loving this conversation. I really am, and I'm excited for you and your position there, and for the athletes that train under you. That's fantastic. If people want to get a little bit more insight, or do you do social media? Can we follow you on Instagram or any of the other kind of sites?
Absolutely. So we do have an Instagram. So our TW strength and conditioning program has that. So we're at TWU strength. But I pretty much run that. So like if you DM that, like I'll get back to you kind of thing. But that's where I'll post a lot of our educational pieces, post some stuff about what we're doing in the weight room. Myself personally, I'm on LinkedIn. So if that's, what you want to reach out to, so just my name, Cole.Hergott, I think. And then on Twitter, it's at chergott94. I don't post a ton of stuff. I more just share what other smart people are doing on there. But that's also another way you can reach out.
Sweet, man. Well, this time has flown by. You're obviously quite adept at communication, and I hope that a spot opens up in a teaching position there, because I think that the students would very much acquire a lot of experience and knowledge from what you've already accumulated yourself. I can't thank you enough for being on. This has been fantastic.
Well, thank you, Rocky. I appreciate you having me on. And yeah, I'm always happy to talk some shop with whoever wants to reach out.
And that's the end to this episode. I want to thank Cole for coming on, as well as Trinity Western University for allowing this to happen. Remember, we've got the NSCA National Conference coming up July 16th to the 19th. I'll be presenting on 2 separate days, Wednesday and Thursday. Just go to nsca.com to register. I hope to see you there. Remember my website, rockysnyder.com. We've got podcasts archived. We got blogs, continuing education. You can just check out what it is I do. For more information, rockysnyder.com. Check out Perform Better's 3-day functional summits, Long Beach, California, Chicago, and Providence, Rhode Island. It's a great resource for all of you. And Satanta College. Remember, satantacollege.com is where you can go for your Master's of Science and a whole bunch of strength conditioning related topics. And we'll see you next week.